Zach trying to get loose. He'll fire. Hey! Knocks it down. Morrow slammed it home. Falling upstairs. Oh! Sexton inside. A thunderous dunk. Allen blocked the shot at the rim.
Welcome to Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Today, we are entering the Spida-Verse. One of the largest trades in Cleveland Cavaliers history has gone down, and Donovan Mitchell is now a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Joining me today to talk about is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Buddy, so much for maybe next year's the win now year. This year's the win with what you have now. So much for a year of just banking on internal growth. Ooh, the Cavs saw an opportunity to go big game hunting, which teams in small markets like this rarely do. And they put it all out there, man. And Donovan Mitchell, a 25-year-old, soon to be a 26-year-old, has joined the team for with some legitimate term on his contract. They went for it, man. Holy crap.
Did they ever go for it? And we should mention we're recording this the night of the Donovan Mitchell trade. We're going to hold off posting it until it's all the details are finalized and it's actually been confirmed, because as we've seen, trades do change from the initial announcement, and we just want to be a little bit responsible, but we wanted to also get our thoughts out there because we are obviously very excited about this move. It's a significant trade. You look at moving Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Ochai Agbaji, and also those 3 first-round picks. We've talked about a lot of times that teams only really get one chance to kind of make this all-in type of move. And I mean, it's no secret. I've had trepidations and concerns about Donovan Mitchell being that kind of guy, that wondering, hey, Colin Sexton, what is the upgrade from Sexton to Mitchell really worth? Is this the situation where you really want to go all in? And one of the things, as I've been digesting this trade and thinking about it, Carter, is I was thinking back to last summer where I was just a staunch supporter of the Jared Allen extension, or I guess I should say new contract. And there was kind of a sentiment that, hey, you could probably go out there and get a Rashawn Holmes or someone that will be 85% of Jared Allen at a fraction of the cost and kind of moneyball it. But what we've learned with Jared Allen and a lot of these other situations, that extra 15% can really matter. And it matters a lot when you start stacking talents upon talents. And the Cavs, we were talking about how special it is that we have these 3 young players that are all top 10 players at their position. We now have 4 of those guys that are young and top 10 players at their position. Donovan Mitchell's arguably a top 30 player in the league. This is a seismic move for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, it's monstrous. They have, I think I saw the tweet was the Cavs have 3 All-Stars and none of them are Evan Mobley. And all of them under the age of 26 for at least 5 more days.
Carter, do you know what teams in the NBA have 3 All-Stars on their roster?
The Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that's it.
Chapter 5, baby.
Oh,
Chapter 5.
It's happening. I think it's certainly exciting. I think both of us have some trepidation about Mitchell as a player, and I think we should talk about that. But yep. I'm kind of at the point now where it's kind of just comes down to, are the people who really love Donovan Mitchell right, or are the people who have some questions right? And what's kind of nice to me is I'm pretty much already past any concerns about value and kind of what was given up, and I'm moved straight into how's it going to work on the floor? Can he not just materially raise their floor, but raise their ceiling? And you make a move like this if you think you're going to be competing for a title in the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, and I remember in my my podcast with S, I was saying how Donovan Mitchell, to me, is a 16-game player more than anything. He's the exact type of player that helps you win in the playoffs. And I was talking about how I really thought for the Toronto Raptors, if they went out and added Mitchell for like OG, Trent, and picks, they have the defensive infrastructure around him to really make it work. And like, let's be honest, it would be intellectually dishonest for me to have sat here all these years and said, you know what, like I understand that there's some concerns, but I really think Garland and Sexton as a pairing can work, and not say that with Mitchell. Mitchell is a better player at this point. He is a better playmaker. The volume 3-point shooting that we wanted to see from Sexton is already there with Mitchell. And it also really helps the fact that all the kind of reporting, I know Brian Windhorst said that Mitchell was jumping for joy on the golf course when he heard. He's really excited to come to Cleveland. Excited to play with Darius Garland. All of that stuff really does matter. And I'm easily swayed. Like I'm self-aware enough, Carter, to know that I have the tendency to fall in love with the players that got me there. And seeing all the smart analysts, the people that I respect, people we've had on the podcast, like Seth Partnow and Nikias Duncan, and all these people talk about how they really like this trade for the Cavs. I'm easily influenced. It's helped kind of sway me, and there's just no denying that Donovan Mitchell is a player that makes this team better this season, and really kind of changes the calculus for this team.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I won't lie. When the principal pieces were first reported, I wasn't super over the moon because of established trepidation, and it is a lot. And I have been warming, but I do, and I'm going to talk about why I'm warming, but I do want to talk about kind of what went out the door. Colin Sexton, who, if he ends up being 95% of Donovan Mitchell, which I think is a feasible outcome, then yeah, that's going to be a little bit painful. If Agbaji turns into, a role player superstar, that's going to be a little bit painful. And I will say, if there's one thing that, it hurt, because you think about what a good fit, hypothetical Ochai Agbaji would be on this Cavs team with Mitchell. Yep. That definitely does. It hurts me a little bit to see that go out the door. And then Lowry, who was a very helpful role player in a major part of the team's identity last year. But you do look at it and you kind of see. And as much as I like all three of those individual pieces, and I do quite like all three of them, we talked about it in the aftermath in the play-in. This is a team that we had three guys that we were sure were part of the future. Sure. Capital S, no question. They will be around for a long time if the stars align, and they will be helpful when this team is trying to contend for a title. And we weren't sure about anyone else. Didn't mean not all of them couldn't get there, but we weren't sure about anyone else. I'm sure Donovan Mitchell is a starting quality player on a really, 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 really good team. And we've seen him be that with less offensive utility around him and with less defensive utility in the front court to enable him to play at the two with a smaller point guard. So the fit is starting to make sense to me, even if the initial price scared me. Now it's just a matter of, is he what we think he is? Is the defensive effort going to be there? Is the ability to play alongside not just a caretaker point guard, but an elite young point guard in his own, and be a gap filler now that he's not carrying that offensive burden? Those are the questions I have that are going to be really, really interesting. A lot of them come down to what Donovan Mitchell decides he wants to be. And it's and that's why I'm so excited that he's reportedly excited to be coming, because if he was coming and it was like, man, I wish it was New York, and that was the vibe, I think that fundamentally changes the way I feel about the trade in a pretty major way. But since it's not that, it's just really, I feel like those things that I'm a little concerned about, I'm a little less concerned about, given that we're getting a fully bought in Mitchell.
Yeah, and I think like, I think part of the evolution that I've had as a fan and fans in general, like, we start to think about the value propositions a little more, right? Like, we play GM in our heads. The trade machine is out there. We build our rosters in 2K and we make adjustments like that. So when you talk about kind of the all-in move when it comes to a future pick standpoint, it's impossible to not pick nits, right? To say, okay, we want to make sure that we're doing this for the right player. But the calculus has completely changed after this trade, because what we had talked about, like you mentioned, is the fact that we have those three guys there that we feel really good about, and we wanted someone from the group to step up and become that fourth player. Now, that fourth player is going to be either Evan Mobley or Jarrett Allen. That completely changes the dynamics of this team. That completely changes what you're realistically asking out of the small forward position moving forward. And I think another thing to consider when you look at this move is, as things stand now, the Cavs are going to have a significant amount of cap space next summer as well to continue to make adjustments to the roster. In addition to that, yes, this was a consolidation move, but you have Ricky Rubio, Raul Neto, Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Jetty Osman, Dylan Windler, Lamar Stevens, Dean Wade, Kevin Love, and Robin Lopez. There is a lot of depth coming off the bench. There's a lot of options. There's still guys that are going to compete for minutes and roles, and I'm sure we'll talk about who we think fits best at the small forward position. But there is opportunity for that internal growth still, and there's a lot of depth that this team didn't cash in everybody and is now super top heavy, like we saw with the Brooklyn Nets or some of these other examples in recent years. This is still a team that I feel pretty comfortable with the depth, and they have that cap space flexibility to improve the roster moving forward. So it doesn't feel like the same degree of all in that I kind of feared as I was looking at Mitchell, what Mitchell brings to the table without being kind of that big wing that we've coveted over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if this is why it kind of comes down to how you feel about Mitchell, and your level of confidence in Mitchell will define how excited you feel in the trade. Because the reality is they did go all in insofar as, if these four as your best players can't make you a contender, then you don't really have a road to find someone who's better than these four. I would say is at least likely. So like to that extent they went all in. But they aren't all in the sense that they can't improve the roster. And that's what's really, really exciting. And again, like I think the compare, we're gonna see this trade compared to the DeJounte Murray trade quite a bit. Or at least I would imagine we would, in the sense that it's two 1/2s that are not quite wing sized, but real impact players, obviously very different players, Murray and Mitchell. And we talked about this plenty once the Donovan Mitchell rumor started, which is, would you rather just gone in all in for Murray, one as much as the point of attack defense for Murray, and God knows I loved Murray, I do think now that it's actually happened, and maybe this is just my brain accommodating to try to meet reality, but now that it's here, I'm like, it feels better that Mitchell's here, and maybe it's the volume 3-point shooting. I think that stuff that made me angsty on that side is a little less coverable. If you're gonna, if Murray's 3-pointer never came along and you had to roll with Murray, Mobley, Allen, that really would have been tough. Whereas it feels like you can probably cut. Yeah, I think I feel a little more confident in Mitchell in that front. And, ultimately, there is something about a guy with a career 28 points per game playoff scoring average. That's a huge number.
It is, and I think offense was kind of the big question mark, right? And we had talked about the need to add playmaking coming into the season, and I think Raul Neto really brings that to the table. We've talked about in the past how Karis LeVert has shown that in the past, and that his playmaking stats were really good last year. And let's see how it looks like with Jared Allen and now Robin Lopez, and probably an improved Evan Mobley as a screen setter. And you look at Donovan Mitchell and those same basketball index stats that I brought up. He's in the 98th percentile for playmaking talent, and his passing creation quality is in the 99th percentile. Like, the Cavs are about to become a much, much more dynamic team. And functionally, when you look at it from just a roster standpoint, Ochai Agbaji didn't play a game for the Cavs. Colin Sexton didn't play the majority of last season. So we are functionally trading Lauri Markkanen from an on-court perspective, Lauri Markkanen for Donovan Mitchell. This is dramatically going to change how much better of a team the Cavs are. And like, Mitchell hasn't played with an offensive talent like Darius Garland either. No. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember, because when guys are really tasked and asked to do a lot on the offensive end of the floor, that's going to impact their ability to impact the game in other areas. And when you look at the buy-in that it seems like they're going to get from Mitchell, that he's excited about this trade, the fact that he's going to be playing with Darius Garland, that he's going to have two elite bigs to play off of. And, you know, there is other talent. There's other playmakers on the roster and stuff like that. I'm interested to see what impact that has on the game, because I think even in the 11 games that we saw with Colin Sexton, his defense looked dramatically better than it had in the past. And I think some of that had to do with the fact that Darius Garland had taken that step forward, that there was less expected of him on the defensive end. So it's just take care of your role, take care of your station. I think that's why it worked with Lauri Markkanen, who traditionally, like, if you're just asking him to defend small forwards in space, that's not going to work great for you. But with the infrastructure the Cavs have, that made him a more impactful defender. And if Mitchell's bought in, I'm curious to see if there is going to be improvement on that end, if there's going to be the effort on that end, because looking at his Draft Express profile from Mike Schmitz back in the day, it's funny because he was labeled as a 3-and-D guard because of his long wingspan. He's even longer and stronger than Sexton.
He is a very strong player. He is built like a linebacker.
Yeah,
in a way that even Sexton, who was, you know, physically strong, clearly spent time in the gym, I don't think he had a frame to succeed defensively like Mitchell does, which is why I think people are mad at him that he hasn't, the last couple years. And I think it's a big challenge for him. I think, you know, to your point, to early Donovan Mitchell comps, a big comp that was thrown out when he started taking the leap was this could be the next Dwayne Wade. And I kind of want him to take that to heart, to think about what an impactful off-ball player Dwayne Wade was with the Heat. What an impactful defender Dwayne Wade was with the Heat. And I hope that's the kind of film he's watching. So, because it's hard to unlearn alpha dog habits, because he doesn't need to be that anymore. So it's going to be a really interesting challenge. And I think Cavs fans are going to need to give him some time to learn how to play next to Darius. I think Darius is going to be comfortable right off the bat because he's used to playing with these ball dominant guards. Like, that has not been Mitchell's experience in Utah.
Mm-hmm. I think it is going to be a bit of an adjustment. I think that's one of the advantages of getting this done at the start of September is these guys are planning on having those training camps before training camp. And I guess he missed the first one, but there is now the opportunity to go out there and get familiar with these guys. And I'm very, very, very excited about the offensive potential of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland together. The fact that they are such talented passers, and Mitchell already has experience playing off of a point guard in Mike Conley. I think Garland is a better offensive player than Conley has ever been, and I would argue probably a more talented playmaker as well. I think that's actually going to be a relatively easy transition. It's going to be interesting to see what we do at the small forward position, but realistically, like, we had wanted to see this team get more three-pointers up, and Mitchell and Garland together, I think there's probably a good chance that you're going to see about 23-point attempts between the two of them. Like, that is a completely different dynamic. And the one part of this, so I was definitely, a Lauri Markkanen fan. I was excited to see what he was going to bring to the table. there's a part of me that's a little happy now that there's just such a clear path for Kevin Love to remain with this roster and play a role there. Like I'm just kind of excited to continue to have Kevin Love as that vet off the bench, and once again, just a perfect seamless fit with a lot of these different lineup combinations. I'm excited for that aspect.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I do want to talk about the volume 3-point shooting. I don't want to let that one go because it is an interesting one, because they did lose one of their high volume 3-point shooters in Lowry on the road here. But I think the path towards a higher 3-point rate as a team is now very much there. Donovan took 9.8 threes a game last year. He did have a down year shooting, was only 35.5%, and he's not an elite 3-point shooter. I think that should be noted. In fact, I think Colin's career percentages are better, but I think if you are watching the season, I think what you're really going to see is the difference in reputation, how much more reputation matters than 3-point percentage. I mean, I think Isaac's 3-point shooting was about where Donovan's was, and I'll tell you what, the gravity is going to be a little different between Isaac and Donovan Mitchell this year. So I think it's going to be very revelatory that this team's offensive ceiling has raised as a result of this. I do want to ask you this, though, because when we were talking to Brad Rowland, we kind of talked about how, the Cavs' goals this year were probably the inverse of the Hawks, top 5 defense, but as long as you can get into like the top, 16, 17 on offense, you're going to be good enough. Where do you think the Cavs' equilibrium shakes out now? Like, where do they need to be ranked offensively and defensively in this new paradigm to succeed? Because I would imagine their defense is going to take a little bit of a hit, just because you're going from playing a season of Okoro at the 2 and Lowry at the 3 just being huge to playing, this smaller backcourt, but obviously their offensive ceiling should raise. So where do you kind of feel, where should their targets be offensively and defensively?
I think you still want to set the same defensive standard. Like,
I do too.
When you look at it, like and this has been a consistent take of mine. Like, I just think when you look at team defense, guard defense isn't 50% of the game, right? Like, it's maybe 20% for those positions. And I think you want both Darius Garland, who I think took a meaningful step forward as a defensive player last year. I think you want to continue to see that and challenge Donovan Mitchell to compete on that end of the floor as well. And I think similar to Sexton and Garland, you're going to see Mitchell and Garland staggered a fair amount throughout the game. Like, I don't think that there should be a lot of scenarios where one of them is not on the court.
No.
And I think that is going to lighten the load on both of them. I think obviously you are going to want to close with both of them together because it's going to be really difficult for teams to, like, when you look at the matchup of the Hawks, like you just mentioned, now Trae Young has to basically guard one of Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland. That is a completely different situation than where you were at before in the playoffs, where, if Isaac Okoro's out there, you can move him over to Okoro and maybe even Lauri Markkanen and just kind of hope that doesn't burn you, right? I think that this is a totally different dynamic, and I think you still want to hold them to the same kind of defensive standard. I'm very, very, very curious to see how Isaac Okoro develops, because now he's gone from one of the guys in the mix potentially taking that step up to kind of the 4th in the rotation to, I think, a place where you maybe don't need to see a massive leap. I would love to see a massive leap because that would really make a big difference. But I think him, even at the 3, is very viable if Garland and Mitchell are out there, because that is just so much offensive firepower. And those lineups work really well with Garland, Okoro, Lowry, Mobley, and Allen. And I think when you look at the internal growth for the young guys, plus the changing out of that lineup from Lowry to Mitchell, that's going to be an even better offensive lineup. So I think that could be something that really, really ends up working well for the Cavs. And the kind of chain effect of that is Karis LeVert now functionally as 6 men, if that's the direction they go. That's an exciting proposition, because I think that is almost an ideal role for his skill set, his playmaking and tough shot making. Like, I'm pretty excited to see what that could look like if that is the direction they choose to go.
So it's so wild, and this is the time to talk about the 3, because this is now kind of the missing link. You feel good about your 4 or 5 starters like you feel great about four of your 5 starters. And they went from having Okoro, Markkanen, Sexton, LeVert, Ochai, like, 100 people, it felt like, in that mix for who's going to play at the 2 and the 3, to it's pretty freaking clear who's going to be in the rotation now. We talked about a consolidation trade. Boy, is this one. Now all of a sudden your options at the 3 are Isaac, Karras, Jetty,
Jetty,
Dean Wade,
and Lamar.
And
did you say Windler?
I did not say Windler.
We should probably say Windler.
I don't think he is.
Carter, I've seen the offseason hype videos.
I don't know if I'm expecting to see him competing for those minutes as of now. Yeah. But with that said,
we should still mention him if we're listing off wings.
Sure. I was talking about contenders to start. I actually wasn't going to list Lamar either. Because I do think it's Isaac, Karras, Jetty, with and really barely Jetty or Dean. I think those two would be surprise starters. So I really think it's between Isaac and Karras. And I think it's an absolute no-brainer who should be in the starting spot, and it's Isaac. I think I would be stunned if Karras was the starting 3 to start the year. Just because of a byproduct of just the basketball alchemy, the mix of who is in that starting lineup. Karras is not an elite spot-up shooter by any means, so it's not like he's adding that. And so much of what makes Karras a helpful player is having the ball in his hands, being that creator. And frankly, I'm not super interested in a ton of on-ball Karras with Darius and Donovan on the floor. I think those two should have the keys to your offense, especially if they're both out there at the same time. Furthermore, all of a sudden, your bench creation has really not taken a hit, but it's smaller. It's less. We were expecting a healthy dose of Karras and Colin coming off the bench this year, or at least in those second units. Obviously, we were expecting Karras to start. Now, Karras is really your primary, shot creator in that second unit, even once Rubio's back. So I think this is actually, I'm putting this starting lineup in pen if I'm the coach, and it's Darius, Donovan, Isaac, Evan, and Jarrett. That shooting on the floor is not significantly worse than last year's very successful starting lineup, and you need a point of attack defender that is able to take on those big challenges. I do not want to saddle any of the 3 of Karras, Donovan, or Darius with guarding a team's best opposing wing creator on any given night. And I think this team is still going to, I think their identity still lives on the defensive end. And that means Isaac should get the nod. Do you disagree with me?
I don't disagree at all. I think that Isaac makes the most sense. I think it's the best way to spread out the ball handling. Like there's just so much skill overlap with LeVert's greatest strength and Mitchell and Garland's, which is having the ball in the hand. As you said, I think you hit on all the relevant points there, and it just makes more sense. And there is an interesting dynamic here where, by kind of thinning out the rotation and kind of making it more clear, okay, we are now counting on Isaac to get these minutes. We're counting on LeVert to get these minutes. There's a real vote of confidence that I think happened with this trade, where we, at the top end, it's a vote of confidence that we believe that Evan Mobley and Darius Garland and Jared Allen are really special, and this trio merits going all in and bringing in a 4th All-Star to bring in probably a new lead scorer. Because you look at how Garland is so unselfish, and the way that he kind of likes to get everybody involved. I would imagine that Donovan Mitchell is going to be the play finisher for the Cavs the majority of the time. I would expect him to be the leading scorer. Obviously, Agreed. Garland's going to pitch in his fair share, but it's a vote of confidence in those guys, and it's also a vote of confidence in some of these other guys that, hey, we are now giving you a legitimate shot to earn a significant role, to step up and be that 5th player. And I'm curious what that looks like for Isaac Okoro, because the other part of this is when you're kind of weighing between he and Karis LeVert, the volume of 3-point shooting, it's not that big of a gap. Like Okoro took about one fewer a game, and he shot it at a higher percentage than LeVert with the Cavs. And if Isaac's offseason work has really paid dividends, and he's able to build off of improving those percentages last year and adding volume to that, I think that there's a real opportunity for him to have an impact this year. And I think Isaac is one of those guys, and I know I've made this point before, but I think it's even more true now. He's kind of a little bit like Tristan Thompson in that with more offensive talent around him, he looks better because he's so intelligent off ball. He finds those passing lanes. He's an intelligent cutter. And I think when you put him with two dynamic engines in Garland and Mitchell that both have such great feel as passers that are able to draw the amount of defensive attention that they have, I think that's really going to open up a lot of opportunities for him. So I would give him the nod. I would probably go in pencil Carter because it's the beginning of September and we're just going off of off-season hype videos and our own kind of conceptions of what this team could be. But I do like you going pen because that's a stronger take, and sometimes we need to get off of the fence and have a strong take.
You're damn right we do, Justin. I'm looking at the Cavs depth chart on ESPN.com, which has already been updated. And, it was interesting because this was a team that I thought had once Rubio was healthy, had maybe 11 guys that could conceivably say, hey, I deserve to be in the rotation. Obviously, they just did a 3-for-1. Right now, I think you can obviously say that, the starting five, whether it's Karras or Isaac are in the rotation. You're going to expect Karras and Kevin and Rubio. That takes you to 8. All of a sudden, there might be some interesting interlopers into this rotation. How deep do you think that JB is going to go? Is Jetty, Lamar, or Dean find their way into the nightly rotation at the backup 3? Does Robin Lopez, a guy that we expected to not be in the rotation most nights because we said, oh, it's fine because Kevin and Lowry have to play quite a few minutes at the 4. Evan's going to be our backup 5. All of a sudden, Lowry's out of the rotation. Your backup 4 is exclusively Kevin Love now. Do you expect guys like Robin Lopez, Jetty Osman, Lamar Stevens, Dean Wade to get into the rotation? You think that JB is going to play a little close to the vest, maybe keep it at 9 on a night-to-night basis?
I think you can go 9 or 10, but I don't think we're necessarily going to see Robin. Like, I think Robin's going to be in the same role where it's kind of more matchup dependent. I can see Jetty, assuming that there's no other follow-up moves. I can see Jetty being in the rotation.
I think it's Jetty and Dean. I think they both get in.
I think Jetty and Dean would probably be the candidates I'm most comfortable with. Dean is coming off of that torn meniscus, so maybe that's a bit of a variable there. Although he was cleared for basketball activities, I believe, in the spring, so hopefully he's at 100% and Dean Wade again. But he's just such kind of a natural fit. Like, we've talked about how we feel comfortable with him filling in at the 3. So if you're talking about a reserve role where in the minutes where Isaac, LeVert, Jetty or whoever else is playing at the 3 isn't there, I think I feel pretty good about him being in the rotation, but I'd probably go about 10 deep. I think there's enough depth and support there for them to do that.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun in a weird way, like I felt like, especially with Lamar and Dean, those are two players that I'm like, well, they've really performed above and beyond the Call of Duty. Every time they've played, I've almost every time I've appreciated them being out there, and I just don't think they can get in, this season. And all of a sudden they're going to have opportunities to continue to prove like, hey, we're not actually just 12th and 13th men. We're legitimately helpful rotation players, which they were on a good team, on a good Cavs team last year. And what's nice is I do think, obviously no team stays healthy all year. They're going to have opportunities to step in and help. I do think it's interesting that even after doing a 3-for-1, even the back end of the depth of the roster, I don't think is compromised in a meaningful way.
No, there's still support there, and we know the value of good support from our partner, Zoom. Aww. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, you're so right, though. Like, it is interesting that we probably are going to see roster battles out there. We're still going to see some competition for minutes, because I can see any of these guys earning minutes and a role. Like, as much as we kind of joke about theoretical Dylan Windler, like, who knows, maybe finally having a normal off season is going to make a difference for him. I know I saw Jamal Richardson tweeted out that Windler looks like a totally different player, that his confidence looks great, that he looks great out there.
He was in those runs that Darius was going viral in, so he's been putting in the work.
Absolutely. So shout out to Jamal. Love all the content out there. And I know he's reached out before and mentioned that he likes the podcast. So give a little shout out there. But yeah, like there's going to be healthy competition for minutes. There's still a lot of options. And like I said, you can still make adjustments on the fly. You're still going to have a significant amount of cap space this coming off season, assuming that there's no other moves or extensions or things like that. You can go out there and add a wing if one doesn't emerge from this internal competition. You can make an adjustment mid-season if, hey, we feel like we have a lot of ball handling, so maybe we move on from a Levert or Jetty or someone else and bring in someone that addresses the need at the three. But it's just such a different calculus when you're talking about finding a fifth guy versus a fourth. Like, the Cavs are just such a better team now as a result of this trade, and it's hard not to get excited. Like, we're always going to pick nits, and like I said, I'm aware of my blind spots and where I go. Like, I follow with the players that get us here. Like, that's part of why I'm excited about the internal competition. Like, I'm kind of happy that after all these years of doing the podcast with you, man, like over 300 episodes or whatever we're up to now, I'm sure it's maybe like 4 or 5. Like, I still feel like a fan, and I don't feel jaded from this whole experience. Like, I'm excited to see what Colin does in Utah. I'm excited to see what Lowry does there. I'm excited to see what Ochai does. Like, I'm rooting for those people.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely be rooting for those guys, especially Colin, man, who I'm glad, seems like he got taken care of after what was looking like kind of a dire off season for him. It just, the market wasn't lining up, and it seems like he got taken care of. So that's really exciting. I do want to ask you about this roster writ large, and I have a couple more on court fits. We're going to be rambling because it's just but what does this roster, if you just were looking at this roster, and this year is still going to be something of a fun, just for fun year. I don't think anyone's picking them to win the East, win a title just yet. But what is this team missing to become a championship contender? What are the like, in terms of like what archetypes aren't on the roster? Is it still just a big wing a big wing defender they can throw at some of the best wing scorers in the league?
I'm going to be a little spicy here, Carter, because it's September.
Spice it up.
What this roster is missing from becoming a contender is Evan Mobley hitting his ceiling. I think now, if Evan Mobley hits his ceiling, what you need from the small forward position is so much different, because you have Garland and Mitchell. Like, if Mobley moves to a point where he is the best player on this team and those are your 2 and 3, I think you're a contender. We just saw a team win with Andrew Wiggins as their second best player in a playoff run. And yes, there's a lot of weird situations. A lot of teams weren't healthy. Trust me, no one is more aware of the context that goes against the Golden State Warriors winning a championship. No one's more aware than I am. But like, I just think if Evan Mobley really reaches his potential, and you're in a spot where Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Jared Allen are your second, third, and fourth best players, you're probably a contender. And I think one of the things that makes me so excited about this trade is, and we've talked about this before, like the difference between the Cavs and some of these other teams that aren't in glamour markets is the Cavs have been willing to go for it, to go out there and spend. They're still under the luxury tax after this move. They still have some flexibility, but this is a real signal that, hey, we're not just content with being good with this exciting young core. They could have stood pat this year and nobody would have complained. People would have been legitimately excited about this season. They went for it. They have signaled that this is serious. We care about winning. We care about adding talent. If we need to make adjustments on the fly in the future, we'll do that. But this is 100% an endorsement of this roster and a legitimate statement to the league that, hey, we're to be taken seriously. We are going to be in this mix.
Yeah, I often think about a conversation we had with our good buddy Ben from former owner of Real Cavs fans, a huge ally to us over the years, and has got my Cavs career started, frankly, over writing at Real Cavs fan. And we were talking about Darius Garland and Evan Mobley last year, and how I said, man, I think we got two like top 25 level talents. And he basically said, if one of those top 25 talents moves into the top 5, you're the Bucks. If both of them stay around 25, you're the Jazz.
Yeah.
And, I think that is really the key thing here is, as many All-Stars as the Cavs can add, his history kind of shows until you got a top 10 player, a no doubt top 10 player, you're not a title contender. There are very few examples in NBA history where that has not been true. So you're right that one of these young guys, whether it's Darius or Evan, need to take the Omega leap, to truly move into contender status. I do think the roster is missing that that big wing 3-4 that can also shoot the ball. Prototypical Robert Covington type of guy. Maybe not lockdown perimeter defender, but just extra size. I do think there is a degree of the team to get a little more conventional with this trade, not playing that. I think having those 3 7-footers legitimately was valuable to their defensive identity. You look at the fact that for a good stretch, they couldn't rebound the ball at all, but they were still getting stops because, you just had 3 7-footers bothering you on the putback. Yeah. They don't really have that anymore. I mean, barring some Dean Wade at the 3. So, I think that having those supersized lineup options, I don't really think they have that in their bag right now. And we know that playoffs are all about a big part of it is lineup versatility, being able to play a lot of different types of styles and still be successful. I think that stuff still matters, but I do think in the macro, you're 100% right. This all depends on whether I would extend it to Garland, even though I think it's obviously much more likely with Mobley that someone's got to take the mega leap to get there. I do want to go back to the Darius Donovan pairing. How's it gonna work, dude? I'm interested. Well, how do you think stylistically these two are gonna fit together?
If I could use one word, I think it's going to be similar to that end of April in the 2020-2021 season where we saw Garland and Sexton really kind of take a step forward together. And Sexton was averaging like 27 points per game, and Garland was averaging 21 and 7. Like, I think it's going to be a really, really natural pairing because when you have two guys with this level of basketball IQ, these kinds of playmaking gifts and ability to create for themselves and others, I think it's going to be really, really natural. Like this, both of these guys play well on and off ball as well. And I think some of what you saw with Mitchell last year was the first time that his catch and shoot 3-pointer wasn't really great. He actually only shot about 34%, just under 35% on catch and shoot threes. Every other year, he shot over 40% on those catch and shoot threes and was a really, really good catch and shoot player. Like, I'm looking at the previous year, 43%. The year prior to that, as I pull up the stats and filibuster, was...
You're doing great. Didn't even know you were looking it up.
43% as well that year. The year prior to that, there once again 40%. He's always been a really good catch and shoot player, and I think Mike Conley maybe showing some regression, some age, kind of hurt that, as well as the fact that they lost Joe Ingles to
one of their best
ACL
playmakers.
Right. So they lost a lot of playmaking. Royce O'Neal didn't really have the greatest year. Yeah, like it's just a different dynamic, and I think having the playmaking of Darius Garland, having even Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro makes the right pass, and Kevin Love's such an intelligent player. Raul Neto is such a smart player, and I believe that they played together. Yeah, they did play together in Utah. He and Ricky Rubio played together in Utah as well. I saw the tweet from Ricky Rubio being excited to be with Mitchell again. I think it's going to be really, really seamless because kind of like a ridiculous high-end example of Ochai Agbaji. Like, I think what the things that the Cavs are going to ask Mitchell to do are going to be things that he's really comfortable doing. And there's just so much value in going from, okay, we think Colin Sexton can do 85% of this. We think, hey, maybe he can continue that kind of progression where he's gone from like 3.5 3-pointers a game to 4 to up to 5 per 36 last year. And maybe that can
keep going. He was ever going to get to 10.
Right. It's such a meaningful change to just go to 10 and to go to a better playmaker and to go to a player that's a little bit longer and a more physically like developed player. Like there's just so much value in that. And I think it's really going to work well. Like I don't have a lot of concerns with the fit in him and Darius. And that's a big part of why I warmed up to the idea of it after kind of getting over the sticker shock on the price. I warmed up to it because I just think that it's going to be such an easy, seamless fit, and it's going to make things a lot easier for everybody else. We have two incredibly talented guys that can create for themselves and others. That's such a great starting point when you're talking about the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years of this team together.
I think that I already kind of noted that if I do have concerns, it's with Donovan off ball, just because I do think it is hard to unlearn habits when you're playing as the primary creator. You did make notes of, he's played with good point guards before, table setters before, and Darius is an elite table setter. I think Donovan on the ball, I'm not worried about much at all, to be honest. For any critiques about the Cavs offense last year, I believe the stat was like Darius was in like the top 5 for running through screens off ball. Having someone who really commands attention on the ball is going to make that a lot easier for him. I think we shouldn't understate, and this was even when we were expecting Colin to be back in full season of Karras, how much easier they would make Darius's life. I think Donovan, just in terms of the gravity he has and the attention he forces people to pay to him, should make Darius's life much easier just by default. And then, one thing that I am excited about is, even though Donovan is similar to Sexton, a small guard, Donovan is a certified above the rim finisher. Yeah. Not just with tomahawk dunks, which very good at those, but just as a finisher. So when he does get that head of steam, he really can explode vertically in a way that
so many dunks this year.
Yes,
I'm so excited.
Like this is a team that hasn't had an explosive, vertical finisher on the perimeter since LeBron.
They should be a real up-tempo team. I think that's
hope.
One thing. That's one thing that we have wanted to see. And I think at times we didn't push the pace as much with the starting lineup because we saw when we would get into those track mates against teams like Charlotte and Memphis.
Poor Laurie was just getting run ragged in transition.
Our guy Lowry really kind of struggled in those situations. And if it's Garland, Mitchell, Okoro with Tower City there, like, that's going to be a lineup that can move. Even the bench lineups, when you're looking at like Ricky Rubio and Howell Neto and Karis LeVert and Jetty Osman, like there's a lot of guys that should be able to push the pace. And I think we're going to see a team that locks in on the defensive end of the floor, that really takes pride in what they do on defense. And when they get stops, when they get deflections, when they get steals and turnovers and blocks, they get out and run. They try to get those easy baskets. Let's have fun. Let's do some showtime. We're going to see a different kind of Cavalanche next season with those kind of opportunities. And I think that this is now a team that is built for that kind of an identity. And I really hope that that's what we see. Like, I really hope that this ends up being an up-tempo team, because who's the player that Garland gets the most comparisons to? It's Steve Nash. Like, I want to go see that.
Yeah, it is very exciting, the opportunities they can kind of pursue, both in the half court and in the full court. I do think that you're right that they now need to run, especially now that they're a little more conventional, and especially if Isaac is starting, because I think Isaac looked his best in transition last year, and now has two major attackers that can help with two pretty elite trailers in Mobley and Allen. We had talked about the Cavs kind of being in the second and a half, third tier in the East prior to this move, hanging out with the Hawks and and Bulls and maybe the Raptors, depending on your perspective. I had the Raptors kind of in their own tier with Philly so in tier 2. So I had the Cavs in tier 3. Where are they now? Because there was a combo in Discord where someone was like, they better be at least 4. And I'm not sure better be factors in unless we get one of those, top 10-esque leaps from, Darius or Evan. Where do you think that they are, and where do you think that they should, aim to be finishing the year?
Yeah, I think I would put them now at the top of that tier 2. Like, I think now they should have the inside track of being that number 2, and then it just becomes a matter of,
They should be better than the Raptors.
They should be better than the Raptors. I think they should be better than the Hawks. I already thought that they were better than the Bulls, so this obviously doesn't change that opinion. Carter, I'm just going to say it. Let's go for Philly. Let's get them. Let's get them. Like, I think it's going to be, honestly, where they finish, and this is not sexy at all. It's going to come down to how healthy these teams stay, how consistent they are in the regular season, how much of a learning curve there is at the start of the year. Like, that's the thing. Like, even though this
trade is crazy, bro.
What's that?
This trade is crazy.
It really is. Like, oh, Carter, you are going to be absolutely disgusted by some of the stuff that I do with this Cavs team in 2K. Like some of the stats and the season stats.
I'm gonna hate it.
You're going to despise me. It's those in our Discord are very well aware of my 2K habits. I'm an absolute psychopath. But no,
foul.
like, this is going to be a really fun team. I think this is clearly now the best team in that tier 2. And, if any of those teams at the top either have some injuries or they take their time through the regular season, like, I think the Cavs should feel good about their chances of competing for home court in the Eastern Conference. But if they don't, like, if it is healthy and if the East is as competitive as we think, and Brooklyn stays together for the full season and everything goes well there and they don't have injuries, like, the nice thing about this team is it's still so young. There's still the opportunity to improve this roster in a meaningful way next off season. Yes, we've given up future first round picks, and
it feels a little less win now of a move to me than Atlanta's felt for whatever reason.
And I think a noteworthy part of this too is, like, part of why the cost was up there for Mitchell was you did have a bit of a bidding war. Like, we've heard it multiple times. Like, the Knicks were in on it, Toronto was in on it, Miami was interested. Like, there's a lot of teams that were interested in Donovan Mitchell, and the Cavs landing him changes the dynamics in the Eastern Conference. The path to the Knicks becoming competitive, like the path to a lot of those teams that we talked about that we really kind of like their young cores or their ability to get better, like the Detroits and that of the world. The bar for them to catch up to the Cavs is a lot harder. And now, like, it's the other teams like Toronto, Chicago, and maybe not as much Atlanta, because I do really like what they got going on. But those are the teams that need to worry about that a little more now, because the Cavs have such a clear path to improving the roster that currently exists through internal growth, through some of the flexibility they still have. And man, like, if a single one of these other pieces hit, like if Isaac Okoro really kind of puts it all together, and even if he goes from the exact player he was last year to taking 2 more threes a game, that is a meaningful improvement. And he's probably going to be a better player on the defensive end too. Like, that really, really makes the Cavs a dynamic, difficult team to play that has 3 really, really high-end to elite defenders throughout the front court.
I want to ask you a series of questions in terms of setting expectations for the team for next year. And I'm going to answer them first so you have time to marinate, since obviously we didn't plan this.
Okay.
So I want to ask what the minimum baseline expectation should be, what a reasonable goal to set for the season should be, and then what a stretch goal should be.
Okay.
And I think it's actually pretty not far off from what they were prior to the trade, but just shifted up a little bit. So I think baseline expectation, this should not be a play-in team. They should be top 6. I think anything less than that, the season kind of didn't go the way that we thought it should. I think their realistic goal should be winning a series. Like, I think you look at how good the East is right now, the likelihood that you play a really freaking good team in the first round is pretty high. So, like,
I'd say it's a certainty. I don't think there's going to be a team that makes the playoffs in the East that isn't a very good team.
Yeah. So, like, to that end, like, I wouldn't call it a colossal failure if they're out in the first round, just because of how good that top 4, top 5 in the East is already. And then I think a stretch goal is compete for an Eastern Conference championship. Not win, but get to the East Finals and really show some stuff. Do you agree with that set of expectations?
I agree with that set of expectations. I don't know. Like, for me, I think the high end is the Eastern Conference Memphis, where they overachieve relative to expectations in the regular season. I like that
framing.
Yeah, like whatever form that takes. Like, I don't think people were high on Memphis. I was really high on Memphis going into last year, but I didn't expect them to be the 2 seed. And I think the Cavs really need to prioritize the regular season. You need to go out there and get home court. Like that should be the goal. And from there, let's see where it takes us. Let's see how much growth we have internally. But I definitely agree. Like, I think as a baseline, avoiding the play-in tournament has to be the standard. Like, that has to be where you put this at. And then
if you
there,
can't, and that wasn't how I felt before the trade. So I do think this has materially affected my expectations. Like,
it should.
I thought that they were likely a play-in team at the beginning,
right? Because you're a hater.
Because is that what it is?
Yeah. You just hate the Cavs. What can I say? That's
me.
why. That's why I'm here to bring in that realistic reality.
No, that's you. That's me, and that's you, buddy.
I summed up perfectly. Yeah, I think expectation should be avoid the play-in tournament, and hey, let's go out there, let's compete for home court, because that's going to give you the best chance to win a series. It's obviously easier when you're playing at home, especially for a young team that doesn't have that playoff experience outside of some guys on the roster. Obviously, we've now added someone with quite a bit of playoff experience and success in the playoffs that's been to a conference finals. And then from there, let's see what happens. The fun aspect of this is if you do go out there and you get home court, the rivalries that we've kind of been craving and talking about and hoping that we develop for the last couple of years, we get to play one of those teams in the first round in all likelihood. Like, you get to play an Atlanta, Toronto, or Chicago, like all these teams that there's a pretty clear path to kind of developing that kind of dynamic, and that's a lot of fun. So I'd really like to see this team go out there and earn home court. Like, that's what I'm going to be hoping for as a fan, but expectations is going to be to avoid that play-in tournament.
I couldn't agree more, buddy. This is a wild day. I think this could very well, I'm not going to count the Sean Kemp trade because I was too little. This is as big, if not bigger, than the Kevin Love trade to me, in terms of, like, it's a lot easier to go all in when you just sign LeBron James.
Yeah. And even then, the Kevin Love trade made me nervous because of the same things that I'm nervous about with the Donovan Mitchell trade, where I'm like, you know what, like the potential of Andrew Wiggins, like, how are we going to fill the spots in the roster? How are we going to get defense around Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving in order for this to be competitive? And I think the thing I learned in that process and over those years, obviously having LeBron helped, but getting the guys is the most important stuff. And then from there, you're able to kind of fill out the rotation, and those gaps are a lot easier to fix when you have those guys that really raise your floor. Like, when you look at the cap space next summer, like, there are interesting free agents available. Like, there's Andrew Wiggins, Jeremy Grant, Harrison
and all of a sudden
Barnes,
we're an exciting destination.
Kyle Kuzma. Like, this should be an attractive pitch to free agents. And like we said, the bar might be low. Like, Isaac Okoro might come out and earn that starting spot and keep that starting spot. And we just need to add a more conventional wing to give the Cavs lineup flexibility and have some options in the playoffs. Like, that might be what the calculus is going into free agency next year. It might be, hey, we feel good about what Karis LeVert did. We're going to find a way to bring him back and Kevin Love back. But first, we're going to sign someone to kind of like the Spurs did with Doug McDermott, where they were able to have a more attractive pitch. Like, just bring in another wing to be part of that mix. Like, there's a lot of ways for this to play out, and that's part of what makes me feel so excited about this, other than the fact that we just added a top 30 player and pulled off one of the biggest trades in franchise history.
It's wild.
And outbid the Knicks.
Yeah, it's just wild, man. There's just no way around it. I mean, this is a franchise-defining move. This is, I think whether or not you love the trade, you have to give a ton of credit to Kobe Altman for, putting it all out there, going for it. No one would have blamed the guy. Just got a contract extension. Had a really exciting year with a young team that everyone loved. No one would have blamed him for just chilling this summer. Yeah. Add your rookie, play well, move on, and see what kind of growth you get. But this was not the easy road to take. This is you would think adding a top 30 player is the easy road to take, but it is now fraught. This is now a thing where there are now going to be legitimate expectations on this core, and you got to give them credit for going for it and going big and saying, hey, I'm ready to stake my tenure in a lot of ways on a big swing like this. It's really, really, God, it won't be a boring season. That's for sure.
Buddy, I was already way too anxious and excited for this season to finally come here, and I couldn't be more excited now. I'm happy that we got this pod out. I'm excited to post this and to continue to talk about this, because I'm sure this is going to be a major subject among Cavs fans for the next few weeks, months. This is a game changer. This is an absolute game changer, Carter. I'm so excited that we started this podcast in 2017. Obviously had a great year, a mixed year in 2018. Last year was a lot of fun, but now kind of feels like we're back, baby.
I was thinking that playoff drought should end.
I'm thinking we're back.
Hell yeah,
the Cavs
brother!
Are back, baby, and that's a very exciting thing. Wishing all the former Cavs all the best. I'm going to be rooting for those guys in Utah. I actually think with all the kind of picks and young players that Utah got, I wouldn't be surprised if they turn things around in the near future. I like what they've done. I think that's a bit of a win-win there. So rooting for those guys, and a big thanks to all our listeners. If you're listening via podcast, you can support us by leaving a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. And until next time, go Cavs.